Hello, friends. Welcome back to the Fertility Confidence Podcast. I'm back from Ireland. It was a beautiful, I don't know if I told you guys that. Tyler and I jetted off to Ireland just for a short little trip. It was wonderful. And this is my first day back on Canadian soil, and I'm a little tired, not gonna lie. I do not travel well. It's fun. I was telling my trainer this morning, she's like, how did you do? Like, how did it go? And I was like, I don't know. I had all these lofty aspirations. Like, I brought my booty bands, my running shoes. I was going to do like a little, keep my body moving. I've been feeling so good. And I'm actually going to share a little bit in this intro on some of the things that I think really relate to this awesome interview with Cynthia. So I'm going to share a little bit about kind of my body, but I had all these like lofty goals. Tyler was dying by the end. He's like, so you didn't do any of those things, but I don't travel to Europe well, guys. Jet lag and me like don't really mix, don't vibe, not at all. So it's almost 2:30 p.m. Eastern here when I'm recording this. So like in my brain from Ireland, it's actually 7, right? Yeah, 7:30. So my body's like gearing up for dinner in bed and the kids aren't even home from school. It's going to be a long night is what I'm saying, but it's all good. We are here. We are back. And it was a really, really wonderful trip. And I'm feeling, very grateful to be able to take that opportunity. Just like step away for a bit. My clients were so wonderful coming back today, but enough about me. Before we get into actually just like a little bit more about me, but before we get into our episode today, I have a few little like housekeeping things. First and foremost, I want to let you know that we are hosting our summer boot camp, which is so exciting. We've actually never done summer boot camp before. And I am really, really stoked to open the doors to the summer version of our very popular Fertility Confidence Bootcamp. We have put thousands of women through bootcamp. We're probably up around 5,000 women at this point through our Fertility Confidence Bootcamp, and the feedback is always tremendous. So we are hosting our summer version starting July 22nd, and you can register. It is completely free to join us. You are going to get 5 amazing video lessons. We are going to have some homework guided for you. We are going to do some amazing giveaways. And you are also going to be able to potentially win a Fertility Confidence Method scholarship at the end of boot camp. So you can read a little bit more and see more about boot camp over on my Instagram page over the next couple of weeks. We've got a couple of weeks here before we start. So if you're catching this episode before July 22nd, 2024, come and hang out with us. You can register at ttc.kelseyduncan.com/bootcamp. The other piece of housekeeping news is I just want to take a quick second and thank our amazing podcast sponsor, Needed. It is so incredibly challenging to navigate the supplement realm, especially as a practitioner. And I'm constantly being asked by my clients, like, what brand? What should I use? What should I do this? And we're always finding different ways to make it work for different clients because every single body is different. What you need is different. I highly encourage you to reach out and get proper support when it comes to supplements. But when it comes to Needed, they have a wide variety of therapeutic grade and amazingly researched products that I can definitely get behind. And one of my favorite products that they have is actually their prenatal powder, because it can be really challenging when your supplement count's getting high, you don't want to take as many pills, and finding ways to get the needed nutrients in. That's funny because I didn't actually mean to use their name, but to get the essential nutrients in, which they also have a prenatal essentials, is sometimes just easier in powders. We can do powders, liquids, things that just cut down on the pill count for you. I personally am someone who does not like taking a lot of pills, so I'm very strategic and picky, and I rotate my supplements based on what my body needs. But if you need to just like mix things up for yourself, decrease your pills, I highly encourage their powder prenatal. My clients love it. It's really easy to throw in a smoothie, and you're getting a lot of good quality, high nutrients to help supplement your diet. So you can learn a little bit more about Needed and their products at thisisneeded.com and use the coupon code Dr. Kelsey for 20% off your first order. So thank you to our friends at Needed. So today I have a interview with Cynthia Donovan. She is the period nutritionist over on Instagram. I'm going to link all of her stuff for you in the show notes. She is also the podcast host of the Period Recovery podcast and a holistic dietitian nutrition. I should have actually registered dietitian nutritionist. Oh my goodness. There's so many different like registered holistic nutritionists, we call them here in Canada. So Cynthia, I'm sorry, but I don't re-record things. So she has over a decade of experience in the nutrition field, and she primarily focuses on helping women with hypothalamic amenorrhea. So we had a really wonderful conversation around what is HA or hypothalamic amenorrhea. Specifically, how do we discern between HA and PCOS? What are some labs you might want to look at? And what are some things that you want to start thinking about if you are thinking about getting pregnant and you currently don't have a period? Because the first thing we need to do is get you ovulating, right? We need to ovulate to get you pregnant. And yes, there's medication for that, absolutely. But that medication is not necessarily fixing the underlying hormonal issues that are going on that are contributing to the HA. And so are we really putting your body in the best state for pregnancy by skipping over those steps? Probably not. So we had a really wonderful time just going through some of the tips and tricks and how to talk about food and look at your exercise. And I love how Cynthia really shares about helping her clients live a more free life. And I think that we could probably spend days talking about different, upbringings and societal thoughts and pressures and images and the comparison game that as women we go through, but also then, we go through that as well in the fertility space, right? And I sit here in this chair and I speak about fertility, and I'm sharing, and I'm on Instagram and I'm on YouTube, and we have the podcast and all the things. And then I also sit in this chair and go, oh my gosh, it's, I love that fertility is being spoken about. I love that clients and women all across the globe who have struggled, who are struggling, are sharing, because it's so important to help you feel less alone. And the other side of that coin is it also opens up a lot of comparison, right? Of, oh, she did this and I did it and it worked for her and it didn't work for me. And we see that even inside Fertility Confidence Method a little bit, because we host our daily office hours. So women who are very active in the community and active on office hours, they know what I'm doing with the other women. They hear me having conversations with them. And so I know what happens in there as well. And so it's a bit of a double-edged sword, right? So we talk a little bit about how that sort of also factors into the HA community as well. But before I push you guys into my wonderful conversation with Cynthia, she had brought up a lot of good, valid points around really using how your body feels to gauge treatment. And one thing that I felt was appropriate and I'm comfortable obviously with sharing, is I'm very fortunate that I have never dealt with HA or struggled with HA, though I could have. So what I mean by that, and what Cynthia and I talked about, was there is a different set point for different bodies. So for me, I would say my body tolerated being underfueled and overexercised fairly well, because if I were to have gone back 10 years and if I did lose my period, what I know now, I would not be surprised, right? So I feel like my body has a very decent tolerance level, but the reality is I was very underfueled for a very long time, and I live a very high stress life. I don't think that should come as any surprise to you guys. I love it here. I love my job. I love what I do. And it's also really friggin' hard, right? We've been talking about that in my socials a little bit as well. And I've gotten a lot of really kind messages. But about 6 weeks ago, Tyler, my husband, we signed up with our personal trainers to do their power couple program. I don't know if that's what it's called. So if Jan is listening to this, I really apologize if I butchered that. Where we were basically kind of like taking what we were doing with them and just amplifying it. We were going to really focus in on our nutrition and getting our macros and actually recording our food. I felt like it was time for me to really like take things seriously, because I sit here every day telling you guys to make sure that you're eating enough, and would go, till 3:00 before I had a proper meal some days. So I was like, I do not feel well. I do not feel my healthiest. I do not feel my best. I am not the best mother that I want to be. I am not being the best practitioner that I don't have enough of me to go around, but I know I have more. I just need to raise my baseline a little bit. And so we started doing this about 6 weeks ago, maybe longer. Feels like longer, but maybe not. I'm not sure. And one of the biggest changes for me was just being really, really diligent with feeding my body and making sure I was getting enough protein and that I was getting enough carbs and fat, getting enough well-rounded macros. I probably upped my protein intake by about 50 grams and likely, 300 to 400 calories a day higher. Not all days were really low and some were exceptionally low, but now just being a lot more stable and balanced, hitting the same set points that were set for me in my body. And to sit here and tell you, I feel like in the moments, I haven't noticed much. Like I've noticed like body composition changes for sure, which I'm really proud of. But I was like, oh, like I felt like I was still just going through the motions. But coming back from vacation, especially, and vacation not being like on plan, I went on vacation, had a great time, didn't stress about it. But also kind of went back to old habits of like, I'm not super hungry, so I'm just going to have a snack, or I don't feel very well. So again, I don't travel very well, so I'm not going to eat that, or I'm just going to have some bread, like not putting that emphasis on what my body needs for fuel, and how quick to go backwards of being like, oh, I feel like shit. So the changes, though, were somewhat minor for me in the grand scheme of things in terms of like what I was eating, has made such a huge difference for me in terms of the energy that I have through the day and through my ability to handle stressful situations, my ability to show up for the kids, my ability to carry on conversations and use my brain appropriately. My mental health, I have shared on the podcast before that after having Nyla, I had PMDD. And it's been something that I've battled with for the last 4 years. And the last 2 cycles that I have had since making the changes have been drastically different. So though, what kind of the emphasis I want to put on this conversation is that though today we're really, talking about the woman with HA who doesn't have a period, who isn't ovulating, I still think this is a really good conversation for any woman who might be underfueling or not eating enough. And you might not, something Cynthia brings up is like, you might not know if that's you, but there might be subtle clues that you need to kind of check in on yourself in terms of like, am I the best version of me? And that was the big thing for me. It wasn't that I was having an irregular cycle or no period or weird ovulation. I actually I've always had very blessed to have a very consistent cycle. I do have a shorter luteal phase and I'm waiting to see how this like impacts that. But I have been always very consistent. So that's not my problem. And that might not be your problem either. But how is your energy? How is your mood? How is your sleep? How is your PMS? How is your connection with your partner? How is your libido? How is your ability to recover from your exercise? How is your motivation to move your body? Like, what is your motivation to be social? If you're really feeling lack in some of those areas, it could be a combination of factors, but at the end of the day, we always want to kind of start with the basics. And I think starting with the conversation of like, are you properly fueling your body is really, really important. So let's get into the conversation with Cynthia. You can find her over on Instagram, period.nutritionist, or I think I already mentioned her podcast, the Period Recovery Podcast. We had a great conversation. I hope you guys enjoy it, and I will see you in the next episode. Hello, Cynthia. Welcome to the Fertility Confidence Podcast.
Thank you, Kelsey. I am so excited to be here today.
I was like scrolling through your Instagram this morning and I was like, this is going to be a really great conversation. So I'm super excited, but why don't we start with who are you? Let us know.
So who am I? I'm thinking more so along the lines of what I do, but I'll tell you a little bit personally who I am too.
Yeah.
But I am a registered dietitian and I have been a registered dietitian for over 10 years now. I think it's like close to like 14 years, but I just, at this point, the 10-year mark, I'm just going to say over 10 years until I hit the 20 year. So just like if someone asks me my age, I'm going to say I'm in my 30s. So anyway, I have been a dietitian for a while now. And for about half of that career, I have practiced as a dietitian that works with women that they've lost their cycles, they have irregular cycles due to not eating enough and not resting enough, which I just want to kind of side note for a quick second is that if I was listening to this podcast 10 years ago to me, I'd be like, oh, this doesn't eating enough. I'm eating enough. Exercising too much. I'm not exercising too much. So I just want to kind of side note what you might think is enough food and what you may think is too much, not enough exercise. Your body thinks differently. So anyway, I am what I like to call is a missing period specialist or hypothalamic amenorrhea specialist. So HA is a short term for hypothalamic amenorrhea. It's a mouthful. And so I work with women across the world that have lost their menstrual cycles due to not eating enough food, whether they know it or not, and potentially exercising too much. So, and I have come to that place, Kelsey, through my own struggles. So I was a woman that lost her menstrual cycle because I was not eating enough and I wasn't resting enough. And like I said at the time, if you told me that, I'd be like, yeah, get the heck out of here. That makes no sense because if we get to talk about a little bit, that HA in the mainstream medical world has a look, has a sort of a definition, and what we're finding now, that's just not the case. A woman could be at any body size, any type of activity level to suffer from HA. So yeah, so through my own struggles that happened, I was trying to get pregnant and I was like, well, I don't have a period. So what's going on? Over 5 years, I struggled, Kelsey, trying to find answers. And finally, after 5 years, after being misdiagnosed with PCOS, I found the answer of HA. And then once I found the answer of HA, I didn't believe the doctor. And then finally, through my own research, I'm like, okay, well, maybe this does make sense for me. And so from that very long period of time trying to figure out, I'm like, well, what if this doesn't work? What if I, don't get a period back? So I ended up pursuing fertility treatment. I got pregnant via IUI on my first baby. And then about 12 months postpartum, I got my natural cycle back. And then about 3 months later, conceived naturally. So yeah, that's a little bit about me. And now I get to support women across the world and helping them regain their menstrual cycle. But not only that, what's really near and dear to my heart is that they find a balanced relationship with food, body, and fitness so that they can live their best life. So yeah. And personally, like in my free time, just in case you guys are wondering, I love to be in nature. I love to spend time outdoors. I love to spend time with my 2 boys. And recently taken up different hobbies such as mountain biking, rock climbing, with my amazing partner.
Awesome. Oh my gosh. Okay. So first off, thank you for sharing your story. I think that will be really helpful for a lot of women who maybe have been diagnosed with HA to hear, but also you said something in there that I know is going to be setting off some alarm bells. And that was that you were misdiagnosed with PCOS. And as a practitioner, I see this a lot and wage this battle, even myself with my clients, going, what is it? Like, okay, we don't want to, put you in one box and potentially be missing the bigger picture. So what is the difference between HA and PCOS, and how do we actually get that proper HA diagnosis?
Yeah, so that is a great question. And there's a lot of gray area with the PCOS versus HA thing. So one of the things to note is that PCOS is diagnosed by something called the Rotterdam criteria. And I'm not sure if you're familiar with that, Kelsey, but the thing with the Rotterdam criteria is you have to meet 2 out of the 3 criteria. One, missing periods or amenorrhea. The second one, androgen levels are usually elevated. And the third, polycystic appearing ovaries. Now, a woman with HA can have the polycystic appearing ovaries, and I'll tell you why in a moment. And she will also fit the bill of amenorrhea or missing periods. So there you go. Boom. PCOS diagnosis. That's how easy it is.
Yeah.
But in fact, it's not PCOS if she doesn't have androgen levels that are elevated. And so what happens is the doctor ultimately sees the polycystic ovaries, which aren't polycystic. There's many poly, and the ovaries have what's called follicles, which some doctors will call cysts. And there you go. So what happens with a woman with HA is that because she doesn't have enough hormones in her body to progress her to the next phase of her menstrual cycle, such as ovulation, the body, like if you do a scan, an ultrasound, you'll go in and you'll see all these beautiful little follicles because they don't have enough estrogen, FSH, LH to make them grow big enough to do what they need to do as far as ovulation goes. So that's where we get that polycystic appearing ovaries. So the big, I would say, thing for me, what I look out for in my clients is like, all right, do you have elevated androgen levels? So if they don't, and then they fit the bill, Kelsey, of you are very regimented when it comes to eating, you might be following a calorie controlled diet or macro controlled diet, you're exercising a ton, you get stressed if you don't exercise. So there's some lifestyle factors that I also look at, because here's the thing with hormones, and I'm sure you know this, like they're a snapshot in time. When you get lab work done. So, what if they have a slightly elevated testosterone level? Doesn't 100% slap that diagnosis of PCOS on them, even though they have, the polycystic appearing ovaries and the amenorrhea. Now, also with women with PCOS, they're likely getting cycles here and there. A woman with HA, like full-blown HA, you're not getting a period for a long time. So it's really important to look at lifestyle factors too. And at the end of the day, regardless, like you can't be diagnosed with PCOS just based on ultrasound. And, again, those cysts aren't exactly cysts, the little follicles that can't advance to the next stage. And so, taking a look at that is really important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a big distinguishing factor that I've seen too with some practitioners, is seeing the polycystic ovaries and just kind of jumping to that PCOS conclusion, not actually going through the diagnostic criteria properly. And now we know too, like that makes total sense though, right? If the follicles are getting stuck in their process because the hormones can't push them into the next stage, then of course there's a lot of little follicles sitting around in the ovary. So knowing that that doesn't naturally just close that HA branch off in terms of digging to the root cause and figuring out what's going on, I think is really, really important. So if that's someone's case, what are some labs that they should be advocating for to help get that distinguished piece together?
So I think too, is just before I talk about labs for a moment, that if you don't get this diagnosis correct and say it's really HA and you're diagnosed with PCOS, you can potentially dig yourself deeper into the HA hole with diet and exercise changes that are really unnecessary. So I just want to side note that. But as far as lab work goes, So some clues, you actually have HA versus PCOS. So low to normal estrogen is going to be HA, low to normal FSH, LH is going to be HA, low to normal testosterone or DHEA is going to be the case with HA. Also to super low libido, low body temp, and if you want to talk BMI just for a second, usually a low to normal BMI. But again, you can have PCOS at any size, you can have HA at any size. So I just want to put that out.
Right. That makes sense. When it comes to like, and this is obviously a part of your story, you had no period, you wanted to get pregnant, and that's the first thing we have to think about is like, okay, well, I'm not ovulating. So like, why, and how do I get my body to do that? Where does the journey begin for a woman that's in a similar boat? What does she need to start thinking about?
Maybe you just need someone to say you need to eat more, which is great and easy. So taking a look at, your macronutrient consumption, how often you're eating, and then looking at your exercise. And like I told you, Kelsey, if someone told me 10 years ago, you're exercising too much and you're not eating enough, I would have laughed in their face. But I was exercising. I was training like an athlete. And I didn't know it because I really was under fueling. And when we're under fueling, we don't have the ability to have as much rational thought processes. Um, and then with the exercise, I mean, you hear it mainstream everywhere, like exercise for stress relief, exercise every day. It's good for you. It's good for you. When it could really be harming your fertility. And I can't remember the actual study, the title of it, but always can look it up for you or share it with you if needed. But over 50% of active women are suffering from menstrual irregularities.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I mean, you can see how sensitive our bodies could be to maybe what we think is too much exercise or not too much exercise. So starting with food, nutrition, looking at your nutrition, looking at your movement, the intensity of your movement, the frequency of your movement, the duration of your movement. So those are some places to start. I know that's, again, all easier said than done, but HA is really a lifestyle thing. It's totally reversible. You eat enough, you rest enough for your body, voila, you get a period back. And if you can go along the lines of making sure you're ovulating, so we know it's like a full blown healthy menstrual cycle, then we're good to go. It's just a matter of your partner being adequately equipped in that department. And then, one other important thing I just want to mention too, Kelsey, is that a woman that is recovering from HA could potentially have I don't want to say the increased risk of, but like a chance where her luteal phase might be a little bit too short. And so that's important to look at if you're like, oh, I'm ovulating, cool, awesome. Partner's good, cool, awesome. But why am I not getting pregnant? So
Right.
I just wanted to throw that out there as well.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think that it's such a struggle when I have these conversations often with clients because from how I've understood it and how I see it in practice is everybody's set point is a bit different. Like what might be too much for me might not be too much for you and vice versa. And so we have to figure out, like I get asked all the time, okay, well, like how much calories do I need to eat? Like how little do I have to exercise or how much can I exercise before it becomes a problem, and finding that set point. And the challenge is that we don't really know, right? Because everyone's journey with that is different. So if someone is struggling and they're hearing the words like you might not be eating enough, how do they start to figure that piece out? Do you have clients track their food? Like what do you do when you're working with someone with HA at the beginning stages?
Yes, and I appreciate you sharing that, Kelsey, just saying like everybody is different
Mm-hmm.
because it really, really everybody is different. And guess what? There's women out there that exercise like more than you do and maybe way less than you do. And for some reason, they still have a period and ovulate
Mm-hmm.
and can get pregnant. And I attribute all that to their genetics.
Right.
So anyway, going back to that, like, all right, where do we start with that? Like, how do I know I'm eating enough? So what I do with my clients first, Kelsey, is I kind of do like a baseline, like foundation thing. Like, are you eating frequently enough? Are you saving all your calories to the end of the day? Yes or no? Are you avoiding certain food groups? Are you eating too many vegetables? Veggies are a fan favorite with women with HA. They used to be my favorite too. And so a lot of women are eating like a lot of food, but the food isn't nutrient calorically dense enough for what they need. So
Right.
the way I, encourage them to eat enough is by more of like a plate method where I say, all right, we need enough carbohydrates, right? Let's focus on carbs being most of our meal. Then let's make sure we're having enough fat. And I don't want to say protein last, but I would say 99% of my clients come in and they're like protein all day. Like there's no problem there. So focusing on that plate method, making sure that there is enough carbohydrates, enough fat, and then some protein. And the way we know if you're making progress is we look at signs and symptoms of your body with your hormones turning back on. So that instead of me saying like you should have X amount of calories or you should eat this exact way, because everybody is different, I give them kind of like, all right, this is our baseline, right? We should be trying to eat like this, but you may need more than this. I don't know, but the way we're going to determine that is by the signs and signals your body is sending us. And so with that, we can tailor it to their needs, but we also need to be careful that we don't tread on doing the least amount of eating and resting as possible, because once we do get one period, this is great, it's awesome, we need to celebrate, have a period party, but we still got to make sure we're ovulating. We still need to make sure we're getting another period, and if you're wanting to conceive, we got to get you pregnant.
Mhm.
So yeah. So is that helpful? To kind of say
Yeah.
this is where we start. And then of course, Kelsey is attached to it as so many different fears and mindset things that come up to eating enough, such as weight gain fear, or resting more, such as I'm going to lose all my strength and so forth. So, it's all easier said than done. Getting support in this department is definitely going to not only help you for the here and now, but also for the future.
Yeah, absolutely. It sounds like the mindset support would be incredibly important, especially if there's food fear or fear in general of changing your diet or your lifestyle or your exercise routine. I would highly encourage some support and some mental health support through that journey, especially if you're also then entering your fertility journey, at the same time as well.
Absolutely.
What are some of your like quick wins that you can share with us for women with HA?
Oh gosh. So many. So my biggest, like, I want all these women to get their periods back. If they want to get pregnant as well. But I think the biggest win of all is being able to live a more free life. And so what I
Mhm.
mean by that is take a second and stop and think about how often am I being consumed by what I have to eat, what I'm not eating, what my body looks like, how much I'm going to have to exercise, or if I eat this, I'm going to have to burn that off, um, whatever it may be. And for those that are in the fertility world, fertility, like pursuing fertility, whether you're pursuing fertility meds or not, that's another layer on top of all this. But
Mhm.
to keep it more period recovery related, that seeing women live their best life. So, and what I mean by that is, I'll share a client of mine who is 100% on board with me sharing her name, Isabel. And she said her relationship with her husband is beyond what she could ever have imagined now that she is fully, fueling her body, getting regular cycles. She said her first year of marriage, she wishes she could go back and feel the way she does now. Because at that
Mhm.
particular time, she wasn't feeling anything at all. She was just worried
Mhm.
about what she was eating, if she gained weight, and so forth. Her life is just so much more full. Women that go on vacation, they're like, oh my gosh, like I don't have to go to the gym. when I'm on vacation, or change my whole schedule around everyone else's schedule because, I can't fit the gym in at certain times. Or I feel guilty that I'm going to have to lose all this weight after vacation. And now I can just be free with my food and free with my movement. And I just want to say, it doesn't mean like I'm telling these women to just like go crazy and eat all the food. What I'm saying is that they're properly nourishing their body so that they could be in optimal health to support a regular menstrual cycle, fertility, and just normal thought processes. Um,
Mhm.
when we're underfueled, we don't realize that we are not having normal thoughts. And one example being, and I'll share one of myself, back in my HA days, my friends didn't want to be around me. They're like, "You're such a," can I swear on here? I know.
Oh yeah.
I was gonna say, I just want to make sure, "You're such a
Yeah.
bitch. Like, Cynthia is such a bitch. Like, I don't want to be around her. Like, she's just always on edge and like always got a plan, and like she can't eat this." And I'm like, wow, I look back now, I'm like, my friends like beg for me to be around now, because I'm so free. I'm so go with the flow. I have spontaneity again. So, also, one other win, one of my clients who was just on my podcast recently conceived her second child. And she's like, I wish I can go back and feel the way I feel now around food, around my body with my first pregnancy. She's like, I feel like I deprived myself. I mean, she grew a beautiful baby boy, was able to nurse her first, even despite under eating, because sometimes our bodies are just so resilient and amazing. But she's like, I'm just so free. I don't feel like I have to go work out when I'm wanting to go puke my brains out. So that's another one. I literally, Kelsey, can go on and on and on. It's just more if you work towards getting enough food and understanding the why behind your food choices, understanding your body more, understanding your relationship with movement, and again, fueling adequately. Like baseline for everything, like any kind of, I feel like, issue out there is eating enough
Yeah.
food.
Yeah. So
And
true.
then, so many.
Yeah. We talk about the concept of like underfueling and fueling your body properly a lot on this podcast. So everyone who's been a longtime listener will probably be like, oh, there's Kelsey talking about not under eating like yet again. But it's so important. It's so important for your hormones, so important for your stress. Like there's just so many factors when we're trying to get pregnant that like at like what you just said, basically at the baseline, at the bare minimum, if we are going to be using supplements or
Mm,
medications to help you make a baby, like I need to at least do the bare minimum to support your body to let those things do its job. And it always comes back to how are you eating, and not just how are you eating, like what are you eating, but are you actually getting enough for your body, and what does that look like? So I think it's just such a good, important reminder that yes, we have lots of like tips and tricks and tools and research based treatments and ART and all the wonderful things that can support you regardless of where you're at in your journey. But there's also a lot of very like seemingly basic concepts that we all should be focused on. And maybe we just need a reminder of like,
mm,
let's start here and sort of build
mm.
on based on what your body needs.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just want to say, Kelsey, that it's so hard. Like you said, how do you know if you're eating enough? And,
Mhm.
it's so normalized. I just want to say, like, to all the listeners out there, like, I feel you on this, like, sometimes big question mark, because the majority of the world, I would pretty much say even more the majority, if that's even like a thing, the majority of the world is on some kind of diet or watching what they eat or controlling their body, and it's normalized. It's a part of many conversations. I don't know how many times I've been places where we just start, I don't anymore, but like start talking about dieting or like watching what you eat, or someone lost weight or whatever. It's just extremely normalized of our feelings around our body and around food and exercise. So sometimes I think that baseline makes it hard for us to even know there is another way of
Right.
all of this, thus making it hard to potentially change our lifestyle with eating. And
Mm.
comparison syndrome is, I mean, crazy. It's just how, you see your best friends, maybe you guys all do spinning together, and, 3 out of the 5 of your best friends are pregnant, like no problem, easy, get regular periods. And you're like, what am I doing wrong? Like, what am I doing?
Yeah.
So then there's that as well. So I think the normalization of eating like in a controlled way or eating less and moving more makes it difficult sometimes to change our lifestyle factors because we're like going against
Right.
society, right?
And what we've been told as we've all likely everyone listening is have grown up in the same time period, and that was the messaging when we were teenagers and for our moms, and when we were learning from them was always like less is best and fat is horrible. And now we're in this time frame of people finally starting to educate around how like no, women actually need fat and carbs.
Yeah.
It's actually quite important, and we cannot be cutting all of these things out and expect to be healthy,
Mhm.
and really redefining the idea of like what healthy looks like, and how your body can feel and what it's capable of feeling when you are properly taking care of yourself. So I love all of this, Cynthia. Thank you so much for sharing some of your wisdom and insights with us. Where can listeners find out more about you?
Yeah, so I appreciate you having me here, Kelsey. And if you guys want to learn more about me, more about HA, you can go to my Instagram. It is period.nutritionist. And I'm a little bit on TikTok and a little bit on YouTube Shorts. And then I also have my favorite place to be, which I wish I could be there more often, is my podcast, which is called the Period Recovery Podcast, where I share client stories and successes, and have other professionals on there. Sometimes I'll pop in for a solo episode. So lots of information on the podcast too.
Amazing. I'll make sure all of that is in the show notes, Cynthia. And thank you so much for coming on.